have a dog too, Christian, but I'm in my loft. That's the best place I can record. So she should be
Yeah,
quiet, but
it's all right. We this is a very dog friendly show.
right on.
Eric, who's on regularly, has a dog sometimes sit on his lap.
Oh,
But
nice.
good morning and good afternoon to all of our merry Marvelites. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk. This is our third and final question mark. Always leave the door open, as they say. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania wrap-up show. You've all heard a lot of what I had to say about this movie, and I'll certainly chime in here, but I'm very interested in hearing from our guests. First and foremost, of course, at the bottom on your screen, Nate Miller, dog like Nate. Nate has been with us very regularly across the years, and Nate, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And making his Marvel movie talk / Blackcast debut, Zach. I want to give you a moment to say one hello, but from $2 late fee, I want to start off where you can actually tell people what that is if they don't already know, because I feel like everybody should know about it. And Zach Shaffer, by the way, I said just Zach, and Zach Shaffer of $2 late fee.
Hey, thank you. I'm honored to be on your show and talk about all things Ant-Man and Paul Rudd and such. But $2 late fee is a 80s and sometimes 90s movie podcast where we talk about a movie, a song from the movie, and then we interview someone connected to the movie. So, for example, we just covered Pretty Woman, a song from Pretty Woman, which is very controversial, by the way. And we're interviewing Laura San Giacomo. That's our upcoming guest from Pretty Woman, Quigley Down Under, but I think genre fans will love her from like The Stand, Disney's Gargoyles, and
But
Just Shoot Me.
I was going to say Just Shoot Me, which is one of those shows that you don't tend to think of right away. And when you think of Just Shoot Me, you think about how David Spade could have frontlined dozens of different sitcom ideas, and he's like, "No, I just want to be the smartass who walks into the scene and says probably the funniest line in the show, and then walks right out."
Exactly.
Which was the perfect role.
Yeah,
for
totally.
him. Yeah,
he was great. He was great.
But of course, neither of them in this movie. But we are going to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. We are going to talk about it with all of the spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Why did you click on this? You know we're going to talk about it. It's not the most spoilery movie that Marvel has put out in a while. I feel like Doctor Strange was the one, Multiverse of Madness, was like filled back to back with like, oh, you don't want to know that this person's in it. You don't want to know about that. This is like, really, it's like the end credit scene. It's like the actual like spoil in it, apart from plot. But we are going to talk about anything and everything. And Nate, I want to give you a chance to go first and tell us just big picture. What did you think of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania? What stood out for you? Uh-oh. No, I don't hear Nate.
I hear him, but I do not hear him as well.
Yeah, I think
there we go.
Sorry,
I possibly muted you by accident.
That was me.
Okay.
I was trying to help with the barking. I really enjoyed it. I really like the pacing of the film. Like the last couple Marvel movies for me have had spots that I've really enjoyed, and then other spots that felt like it dragged. And this one, it really felt like it felt like watching a graphic novel, and that it like there were parts of where I could like draw lines of like, all right, that's the end of an issue, that's the end of an issue, and it just kept the motion going really well, and I really liked the characters. The performances were it still felt like an Ant-Man movie, but less rigid than they have kind of in the past. I thought the CGI looked great, and of course, Jonathan Majors was awesome as Kang. So I really liked it. I don't know if it's just because I had really low expectations, but especially of the last 3 Marvel movies I saw, this is definitely like the best one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's fun. It's light in the way that you want Ant-Man to be. It's wacky in the way you expect a guy who talks to ants, who can get small and smaller and smallest as the movie goes along, and bigger and biggest. So, yeah, I think that it's more like, look, when I saw Eternals, I think I knew, like, okay, I can think of a lot of things that people might focus on what they didn't like about it. This was one where I'm like, oh, not everybody should love it, but why do people hate this movie so much? Uh, Zach, tell me what you thought. What stood out for you about Quantumania?
Well, the Ant-Man franchise was the first one I introduced to my son. I think he was 5 or 6 at the time when the first Ant-Man came out, or when I showed it to him. Probably the most kid-friendly in the sense that it wasn't super threatening, super terrifying. The bad guys weren't that scary in comparison. So we were really excited to see this. I came in like Nate did, but with pretty low expectations. Being a February movie, and notoriously Hollywood dumps their kind of crappiest movies in February, right? So I was expecting it to be on the level of Eternals. If I'm hopefully I'm not being too controversial. I was overly pleasantly surprised. Like walked out of the theater with a big smile on my face, laughed out loud several moments throughout. Um, I kind of echo what you guys are saying. I don't understand why people necessarily are hating on it. What do you expect? It's a Paul Rudd movie. You're going to get a bunch of jokes, and it's going to be silly. And dare I say, the most risque out of the three, like kid wise, but still a super kid friendly, not too scary movie. And I think younger kids, younger people, younger Marvel fans can go to this and not have to close their eyes every 5 seconds like they would in Multiverse of Madness.
It's a great point. I mean, Multiverse of Madness was such that my wife hasn't seen it because she's just like, and there's like, him getting impaled on the wrought iron fence. I'm like, oh,
Right?
stuff like that, and it goes back to like when I was watching the premiere episode of Squid Game in another room, and my wife heard it. She was like, "Oh yeah, I don't need to watch it. There's just nothing but gunshots." She's like, "I don't need to watch that show," you know. So basically, it's it is one of those things that I hadn't thought about it because my son's 7 now. I just last year got to show him Star Wars for the first time, so it's really baby steps. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
So
totally.
he hasn't seen anything Marvel just yet, apart from some animated stuff. So, but now that you put it that way, this is a lot more kid friendly than what we've gotten, recently. I would say, but yeah, I think, and Nate, you mentioned it. It's the one thing that stands out that even people who don't like the movie are like, yeah, but Jonathan Majors is fantastic,
Yeah.
and anyone who's seen him in anything, I don't think anyone's surprised he's fantastic in this, but it's just this iteration we get of Kang, who is essentially the same entity as He Who Remains in Loki, but they're still very different characters because it's a different part in that flat line or that jumbled up line that is his life. Let's talk a little bit about what he brings to a character like Kang. I mean, it's really comparable to the fact that we got so much more depth out of Thanos than I ever saw in the comic books.
Mm.
Let's highlight him a little bit more, Nate. Talk a little bit more about Jonathan Majors in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely helps that I think the character was really well written for the movie. He has some great material to work with. The fact that Kang himself kind of plays a character to Janet, like him being able to emote that change from the like, oh yeah, help me, I'm a scientist, to like, no, actually, like this is what it is, and that you could see that shift within him. That was awesome, and of course, like he's super jacked, so like the fight scenes were cool, and like I don't know. I really enjoyed that fight scene at the end with them a lot more than I thought I would. Like, and it didn't feel cheap that like Ant Man beat him because like it was more of like a technicality thing. He just kind of got lucky because he was getting knocked around there for
Yeah,
a
he was.
while.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was.
And I distinctly like one of the scenes I remember the most um, from that movie is when they start like attacking the city, and he just like goes down from his tower and suits up and just starts blasting indiscriminately, just like energy beams, just like, and I was like, oh, that's a bad guy, you know. And
Yeah.
and Marvel has this way of like every time they get a good bad guy, they fumble the bag somehow. But part of it, I think, is due to the nature of Kang, and there's lots of variations, so they can kind of kill one without still getting totally rid of the character. But I have a feeling that Kang the Conqueror specifically is going to be back, and this, I think superhero stuff, especially like obviously the main characters are important, but when we were talking about specific stories, like who they're facing, the villain, the problem is like just as important. And I think that's for me is what really hit with this movie is that, like, yes, it's a Paul Rudd movie, it's an Ant-Man movie, so it's a comedy, but there was still kind of that gravity brought to it by Jonathan Majors and his performance, and
Totally.
and you could even see like, I think that's why I felt like what's his name, the Hank, older Hank,
Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas. I have not really liked him as Hank Pym until
Right.
this movie.
Interesting.
Because I didn't like the whole rigid, like, angry old man thing. Like, I wasn't really rocking with that. And then now, in this movie, he's more of, like, maybe just because he's retired, but, like, he's still a genius, and he's still, like, about his business, but he's a little more, like, I don't know, relaxed. And, like, just the way that he interacts with Cassie and the way that he talks about the ants and stuff, like, I feel like everyone's performance in this was just much better than I expected it to be. But yeah, Jonathan Majors, I think, definitely hit the, like, and knowing too now that Kang is the big bad, is the Thanos of this next saga that's coming up, like, I am just over the moon excited to see him in more movies, which is good because I was getting a lot of Marvel fatigue, and this was kind of like, I don't want to say it was a deal breaker, but after going to see Doctor Strange and it was like and then seeing Wakanda Forever, which I was not a fan of, we were kind of debating going to go see it in the theaters, but Jonathan Majors drew me in after watching Loki, and so, like, as long as they can keep this throughput, I think there's a little more hope for this next phase.
Yeah, I agree. I think the timing of finally giving us Kang is definitely right. It's been a while since Endgame, and it's been a lot more self-contained. Yes, we're dealing with the multiverse, and that's part of the bigger issue here. But I think it was nice that we got a little taste of what's to come from Loki. But Nate, to go back to the point you made, where he just basically storms out of the tower and indiscriminately just starts destroying stuff. It's a great moment in that he knows it's not helping his cause in any way, but sometimes it just feels good to kill a bunch of people and break stuff, so
Yeah.
somebody can go ahead and take that sequence and set it to the Limp Bizkit song, break stuff.
Yeah. It's like a toddler that, like, is playing with his toys and then gets upset and just starts breaking their own toys. Yeah. Like, because, like, no, it's my stuff. Do what I want. And it fits the character, like, really well without it being, like, super cliche.
Yeah, and I think your point about the fact that we're going to get a multitude of Kangs, and we see that in the mid-credit scene, you're able to get variations when you see him next. Your character development isn't as locked in. You don't have to explain everything, and we're going to get some very different versions of him, even as we see in the end credit scene. That is clearly something that'll be from Loki. But Zach, I wanted to give you a chance to sing the praises of Jonathan Majors as Kang in this.
Yeah, I was first introduced to him as an actor in Lovecraft Country and thought he was the best part of that series. Such a shame that it wasn't renewed or whatever, but he was fantastic in it. I'm like, who is this guy? And I want to see more of him. Then I see him in Loki, and I'm like, okay, I like this character. I like where they're going with this. And then obviously in this, he was epic. I want to echo my love of that blasting scene. But then I was like, this is safe because he's killing little organisms and no one cares about little organisms, and it's all good, right?
Yeah, he just took a little off the top of the broccoli guy. It's all right.
I was
Holy,
thinking about that
I,
too when Ant-Man starts knocking over buildings, and I'm like, aren't there people in those buildings?
yeah, but they're organisms, right?
Yeah.
And I love,
Wait,
by the way,
yeah, it's not like Superman trashing Metropolis while he
Yeah.
tries to kill Zod. It's
yeah,
like, it's a bacteria just drowned. I guess it's okay. What were you going to say, Zach? Sorry.
no, it's okay. And there wasn't that blaring like doom doom kind of sound effect throughout the entire movie, which I appreciate because that's
Also
a little
true.
old too. I was having withdrawals from Marvel, just like thinking, okay, like missing the original Avengers movies and hoping for that same spark again. I feel like he as an actor brings that level. Man, he's jacked. And then we're watching the trailers, and there's a trailer for Creed 3, and I'm like, oh, okay, he looks he's like basically Clubber Lang in that, you know.
Yeah, I made this point earlier, but I'll reiterate it because it made me laugh when I thought about it. That scene that Nate's talking about, where basically he and Scott are punching each other, it made me realize, like, wait a minute, his character in Creed 3 is also a Kang. Wait a minute, maybe every character he's ever played in anything is also a Kang. So,
Right.
it's
I
but
will say too, like that fight scene, part of me was like, no, I think he should probably be destroying Scott a little bit more, but then I'm gonna let it happen. I'm gonna let it go because I love Paul Rudd so much. Honestly,
yeah.
like he can do no wrong in my book. But man, what an imposing actor! Like what a way to like turn on that switch of feeling really sympathetic for him at one moment, and then the next moment being very fearful of him. I mean, that's a level of gravitas that, I mean, I love Thanos. I think he's phenomenal, but maybe this is even a notch above that in performance. I can't wait to see more.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of I feel like we're going to get a lot more of him on screen. The specter of Thanos loomed over Phase 1 and beyond. It was always just sort of there, and you only saw him a little bit. And it really wasn't until Infinity War that he was in action, so to speak. So yeah, I think that we're already getting to see so much more of Kang, and I thought it was great, to just watch him interact with the different characters. I mean, it's there's the moment where he is claiming to just be a scientist and not a
Mhm.
conqueror,
Right.
and then there's the realization of like, oh, this is a really bad guy.
Yeah.
And I'm repeating myself from an earlier conversation, but there's that look in his face where he's like, yeah, I'm a pretty bad guy. And there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of dialogue you can put in his mouth, but she says, who are you? And he's like, who I need to be. And I'm just like, oh, that's such a great line, because
Great
it says
line.
everything about who he is and what he thinks of himself and what he thinks about what he's doing. And sort of on that is a point that I've thought about a lot since I've seen the movie, is that this Kang insists that he's the good one that can stop the bad that's coming. He who remains also insisted that he's the good one who can stop who's coming. So that tells me that they all think they're the good one who can stop who's coming, but they're all actually really terrible conquerors,
Well,
But
wasn't he who remained? Wasn't his plan to keep the sacred timeline? So,
yeah,
in order to not, in order to keep Kang the Conqueror from like being created, isn't that? Did I misunderstand that? And then
I
once they
think
broke that, then you got the multiversal war started again, and then from that, Kang rises up as the Conqueror, and then all the other Kangs are like, "You're too strong." So then they sent him to the quantum
right.
realm.
I
Is
think
that
that
that's why?
filling in those pieces between those, I think, will be sort of the interesting part of it, because that's what he said he was doing. But I don't know that I believe Kang, when he
Yeah.
talks to us. But you're right. Loki and yeah, Loki definitely, the Lokis, I guess, could very well have started all of this, and we'll be able to trace it back to that. But I think it's a very intriguing saga, and it's very different. Thanos trying to get the stones to snap away all of half of all living things is just a very different approach. But I like that we're having some big stakes now after it's been a few years. I know that the release schedule was slowed down by the pandemic, but the fact that even though for this movie the stakes might not have felt so high, it's just knowing who Kang is and really seeing that mid-credit scene, just realizing like, yeah, this is really only the beginning. And I do like that narration where Scott's thinking like, hey, we did the right thing, didn't we? Wait, maybe we didn't, and it's great to have that to think about, because I don't think Guardians 3 is going to really tie into this much. I would assume the Marvels does, but I think Guardians 3 is going to be fairly self-contained in dealing with Adam Warlock and their issues, and and James Gunn working out a great soundtrack. But
I want to say,
ahead.
really quick too, to what, sorry to interrupt, but what that narration that Scott was doing in the monologue in his head at the end, and how great that was, because he's clearly, like, I felt so relatable in that moment, because you have those moments of like, yeah, everything's going fine, but what if it's not? That's self-doubt. And he's such a great character in that way, that he's not confident. He's kind of an everyman. He is a doofus at times, but that's what makes him so much more like likable and relatable. He's not over the top, not overpowering. But when he needs to be, he is, which is great. And I love that final scene where I'm like, oh crap, something's going to happen. Something bad's going to, it doesn't, but maybe it will.
Just something bad happened to that ice cream cake. That was really the only bad thing that happened.
So. And by the way, I don't think I'm going to look at broccoli ever again the same way I did in this.
Yeah, I know, the broccoli guy. What were some other standouts for you, Nate? Obviously, Jonathan Majors is a great place to start. But was there anything you were surprised by in terms of? Well, you said earlier you were surprised by Michael Douglas because him as Hank Pym has not really resounded with you before. Anything else that stands out from a performance standpoint?
I mean, I think the broccoli guy is a great place to start. That the world building that they accomplished in this movie was really impressive. Especially a lot of the CG places in Marvel movies have become very bland and repetitive. It reminded me a lot of Star Wars, which I'm sure was probably an intentional reference, but like, just the different creatures and the way they interacted. The drink the ooze scene was hilarious, and also is a nice, plot hole plug of like, how do all these different beings know how to speak to each other?
Yeah.
I'm not super happy with Bill Murray right now, but that cameo was nice, and the whole Lando betraying everybody, homage was there, and like, I just really enjoyed that world, that space, and especially too the kind of subtle, not so subtle political commentary throughout the film too, which was interesting to me at the start of this idea of this white family going and liberating these indigenous people that were conquered by a black man. But
awkward.
Yeah, and of course,
the ants
like,
thing was cool. But Hank is a socialist now, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, well, I mentioned this earlier in an earlier conversation, and I actually had somebody write to me on Twitter who said, "Oh, so you enjoyed that socialist propaganda?" And I was just like, "You mean the one joke about the ants living in a socialist society?" I'm like, "Yeah." My exact words were, "I didn't lose any sleep over it. It was a joke. It's fine." But when you do peel it back and you think about it, it's interesting because Scott is in the, hey, I've already saved the universe once. I don't feel like I should need to do anything else. And Cassie is literally needling him in the beginning part of the movie, like, don't you want to try anything now? And even when they first get to the quantum realm, it's like, we need to help these people. And he's like, hey, I got a book tour, I'm doing the podcast, which has been mentioned, and other Marvel stuff. He's like, I don't got time for all this. Let me ask you, Zach, about the world building and some of the creatures we met and a lot of the crazy things that we saw in this movie.
Well, I had an interesting discussion with my son after the movie about how many holes we all have, which was really entertaining. And then, of course, my wife going, I have 8 holes. And I'm like, that's great.
That didn't help.
No. So, and probably to this day, since we saw it on Friday, like the most quotable line, "I have holes." They took like characters that would be, to me, it reminded me a little bit of He-Man, the original Filmation cartoon.
Oh
with
yeah.
random side characters where I'm like, who the heck is this guy? But
It's
wanna
funny
see
that
more.
you say that because the drink me guy, I always forget his name. He's very Orko
He's
from
totally
the
Orko.
yeah.
Yeah, I was expecting the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo music to pop in at some point. My gosh, yeah, I wanted to. I'm like, my son's kind of phasing out of action figures, but at the same time, I'm like, but if they come out with new action figures based on these side characters, that would be really cool.
I
The
want a
light,
model of the dude, yes, with the light head. I want
so
him to
cool,
have
and
a
I want it to
statue
like
of that
light
dude.
up, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The light definitely has to go on. Well, I'm 47 and I haven't quite yet phased out of action figures. So
No, it comes
yeah.
back. It comes
Oh
back.
yeah, that's true. It does come back. Yeah, that's a great point. There's a
'Cause-
stretch where I wasn't buying Star Wars prequel stuff,
Yeah,
but I
my
have.
wife's like, should we get rid of these? I go, no, because Bodhi's gonna want them again.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I'll
well,
put
that's
it.
fun. It's funny you say that because that was always my thing. So I have like all my original trilogy Star Wars stuff, and that was what I told my son. I was like, well, when we finish watching Return of the Jedi, because most of the stuff I have is Return of the Jedi because I was the oldest. I was like, yeah, we can open that stuff up. And so periodically, he's like, when are we going to open those? I'm like, I did promise that, didn't I? And I was like, I gotta wait for a day that he's homesick and his sister's at school because I don't want the little pieces to get everywhere.
No,
Yeah,
Ziploc
but
bags.
yeah, but I think that you can see that the people involved with creating some of these situations, they had fun with it, and they didn't create a world that is entirely terrifying for the hour and 45 minutes they spend in there. And
Right.
there's certainly scary elements to it, but that is definitely a direction you could have gone, where the quantum realm is just this terrifying place and there's no fun to be had, and then it really wouldn't have been an Ant-Man movie.
No.
So I think knowing whose story this is goes a long way into that kind of tone. And I'll give go ahead.
I was gonna say what Nate, just piggyback on what Nate was talking about in regards to the Star Wars vibe to it, which I think is brilliant. By the way, I never really picked up on it until after you mentioned that. I'm like, oh yeah, it makes total sense. But that's what made it more fun. Like this whole universe, right? That you're going to drifting away from, when he's in San Francisco and it's clearly a set, but I don't have a problem with it because I'm like, we're not going to be there that long. I was just mesmerized by this whole world that was created. And I said to my son, I'm like, like 90% of this movie is all green screen. It's amazing what they were able to pull off. And I mean, I want to see more of that world. I doubt we will, but you never know, right?
Yeah, you never know when somebody is passionate and comes to them with the right idea for like a Disney Plus series or something,
Right.
and it's like, let's go back to the quantum realm. And it's like, sure, we might as well. And I definitely agree with that.
Orko,
Also, joining us now from the quantum realm is our pal, Kate Cornell. Kate, thanks for joining us.
Sorry, I had a lot of tech issues.
That's all right. I'm living in tech issues right now here at the new house. So we're just sort of talking about the world building, and Nate was making the point that that somehow this turned into a really fun Star Wars movie at one point.
It was the best Star Wars movie since Last Jedi.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I agree with you on that. It was like the amount of characters. You even had a cantina.
Yes, that's true.
You had
that's a great point.
Totally.
Yeah, it was like there were so many little bits where it's just like the flying thing.
They were playing music. They were playing space music when we walked in the cantina. I was like, oh, this is Star Wars.
Yeah, you have to there's the, Janet is the Obi-Wan character that goes into and starts talking the new language, and Luke is just like, what?
Totally.
Well, Kate, I want to give you
and
a
of course
chance
he's like, I've built an empire, and I'm like, so is the Empire Striking Back? Is that what you're telling me? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. It definitely looked like that Death Star hangar shot when you look down.
For real.
Yeah, but Kate, so let's give you a chance to start where we all started. Sort of big picture, overall thoughts. Star Wars notwithstanding, just overall feeling about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania.
I think here's okay. It's like Caitlin's back. This is how I start things. It's like, yeah, all right. I think it was definitely a nice kickoff to phase 5. It felt like they went back to their roots in a way of it wasn't as crazy as like the Thor movies have become in terms of comedy, but it was a good balance of like good character building, good relationship building, funny, but there's drama in it. Like you still see like all of the pieces of a good Marvel movie from like phase 1 or phase 2 are back and they're present and it's well balanced. I do feel like Ant-Man and the Wasp didn't have anything to do with their own movie, which is okay. Very similar to the way that like Black Widow didn't really have anything to do with her own movie. It was about Yelena and the family and and kind of like setting up the next piece. Like this was Cassie's movie, and Cassie in a way like had to fight her own nightmare, which I really liked because she was fighting Modoc, who was the face. Because once like he like puts up his mask in the first movie, that's all she sees, and it's like now it's just a giant floating head to a 6-year-old that's like
that's funny.
that part of her that's still traumatized, and she has to kind of defeat the thing that literally tried to kill her but has been kind of haunting her. And it's nice that they kind of put that in the beginning of like, I was almost killed by a bee when I was 6. I've never had a
Right.
normal life, and then the bee comes back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
That's a
this
good
was
point.
Cassie's movie, and you have 3 generations of representing like the generational trauma that is present in our real life world. So when Marvel does meta commentary, it's really great, and when it does commentary, it sucks. So like when they're able to be like all 3 generations of we don't talk about shit from the past to oh, what is the like Hope going like what does the past have to do with this? And Cassie's just going, you all have these cool powers, like can you use them for something? Can you do
Right.
something? Like we got to help these people, and we got to
Mm.
help the people in the park that we're getting like, we got to help people. And I felt like it was 3 generations represented in one Marvel movie commenting on each other very, very well. And
It's an interesting point that you made though, because this movie has two Ant-Man, two Ant-Men, and two Wasps, and it was still really the driving force. Really is
Cassie.
Cassie.
Yeah.
The little whoopsie, unintentional call to action, but then once they're there, the need to actually help out
Yeah.
instead of just find their way out of there. And yeah, I think it is very you can tell for what you're saying, Kate, is that this is a lot of like, yeah, we're planning ahead for the future, and we've talked a lot about how they recast the actress from Endgame for
Yeah.
Catherine Newton, and you just know like, oh, you're going to see probably a lot more of her
Yeah.
than anybody else
Yeah.
that with a suit
I also feel
in
like uh I don't know if you guys have talked about this or if Christian you've talked about this on other podcasts. Did anyone feel like there was a scene missing?
In what
I don't think
particular
I felt like that specifically, but
Like I
let us
felt
know.
like
Let us know
I didn't
where you think that they maybe switched the reel too early.
I didn't feel like I didn't feel like there was a scene missing until Giant Man comes and he's yelling at Kang, and he's we had a deal and our word is our bond, and I'm like, wait a minute, he never said that. And like that interaction and
Well,
that
he in
that
the prison
personal
they made the deal.
They did make a
they did make a
deal.
deal, but
I,
like the continuing but like how
I,
he's talking to him and destroying like towers
I
and light
think
posts and stuff like
the escalation might be a little bit of a jump, but
yeah.
I'm gonna say that with a 2 hour and 3 minute runtime, there's definitely stuff that's missing because nobody seems to make a 2 hour movie anymore.
Yeah.
But Marvel's kind of intent on actually putting out 2 hour movies right now.
Right.
So yeah, there's probably something fell by the wayside. I don't think I thought about it as you say it. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's definitely very upset. I felt like logically it was there that, you know, he felt like Kang had made him a deal and he was trying to go against it. But you know, there might have been a little bit there. One thing I wanted to steer into, because he's come up now, and there's some wildly different reactions to MODOK. And I want to ask you first, Zach, your thoughts on getting Darren MODOK with his giant face and baby legs.
Well, first of all, there's a movie from the 80s called maybe it's 90 called Doll Man. It's from Full Moon Entertainment, and their tagline is 13 inches with an attitude. Tim Thomerson is a alien who tracks a villain from outer space and comes to Earth, and they are tiny when they get to Earth. Well, he demolishes the villain in the first 5 minutes of the movie, to the point where the villain is just a head on a little platform. Wow. And it's all stop motion animation, and it's terrible looking, but it's very enjoyable.
This is the studio that gave us the Puppet Master,
Seed
yes.
People, Subspecies, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of stuff on Tubi.
And if you love all those movies, this is a good time to make sure people check out $2 Late Fee, because
because we talk about some of those movies.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry, finish your thought, Zach.
Yeah, no. So there's a connection here, because as trashy as that was, I still love the heck out of it. So. Right. You know, when Darren's revealed as MODOK, it was so hilarious, but I feel like that's the point. I can, in that moment, I heard so many people that I know are like diehard fans of MODOK go, oh, you know, which kind of made it more enjoyable too. Because it's like, look, this is Hollywood's way. This is not, you know, they're not redesigning the suit. He looks the same. It's just what's underneath. And I have no problem with that. I thought it made it more entertaining. Again, going back to what I said originally, this is a very kid-friendly movie. If they made MODOK look more intimidating, I think that would be terrifying, night terrifying for young children. But to make him look like this baby man was so much fun, and I had no problem with it whatsoever.
I think that MODOK is going to be a character who finds himself in sort of the same conundrum DC did with Batman after the 66 live action series with Adam West, where it's like people don't take a character seriously for a little while. It's hard to take MODOK seriously. You know, it's funny because, Zach, you're talking about people who really feel passionately about MODOK. Those are the ones who are like, I can't believe they ruined MODOK. And I'm like, didn't MODOK ruin MODOK? He's a giant head. And, you know,
I refuse to believe that there are people who are passionate about MODOK.
I wish you were right, Nate.
Like, there's so much other
Oswalt,
stuff.
Man. Tell that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like
but he accepts that it's a joke, though.
Yeah, the Patton Oswalt version, and we've talked to Jordan Bloom, who was the co-creator and showrunner of that show. It's a very specific, funny take on MODOK, and I think that works. This fits right into it. You know,
totally.
It's like you can kind of explain away, like, yeah, that's a variant of MODOK, but it's really the same guy. But I don't know. I don't need much out of MODOK. There's characters that I don't have reverence for, you know? Did people see James Gunn's The Suicide Squad and go like, what did they do to Polka Dot Man? Come on, you know? So Nate, you find that hard to believe. So I'm going to assume that means that you had no problem with the way MODOK was used in this film.
I thought it was genius. When he was like Darren, I was like, wait a minute.
When they all say Darren,
it's so funny.
What?
Also, the fact that like Darren is one of those names like Chase or like the names that you can't take seriously. Like you can't say Darren and be like, oh shit, it's Darren. Like you can't do it. Like
it's Randall.
No, it's not like having a name like Kang. You know,
no.
It was just so clever, like with the way that he went out to have that turn into him. Because one, it makes sense for him to be in the quantum realm, and then two, like it makes sense that it doesn't completely make sense, but it's plausible that he ended up with a giant baby head.
Yeah, and also that Kang would have complete and utter disdain for this annoying person. You know, he's like,
you don't
talk when I'm in the room.
Is the best.
Great.
Yeah.
And I wish I had that power. Also, like, I know this has been probably talked to death, but I have to say it. Jonathan Majors saved that movie. Jonathan Majors made that movie. And the fact that his rendition of Kang in this one is so different and so quiet as opposed to
Yeah.
other Marvel villains. And they did it very like Peyton knew what he was doing when he directed Jonathan Majors, because he was focused a lot on the hand movement. And like when he was, it didn't take a lot for you to feel that power. So props to the sound design team, because like it didn't take a lot for Kang to be scary. And he's so different from his characterization of He Who Remains. And he's going to be so much different than Council of Kang, which was revealed in the mid cred. And the last cred with Victor Timely. So that was cool.
Yeah, so we see all these different versions of Victor Timely being a great name, but and we've talked about how
he's there.
We get to see Rama Tut, we get to see Immortus, and all these other variations.
Anyone think the third one is a weird version of the Scarlet Centurion?
In an earlier conversation, our pal Daniel Drew in the chat, who seems to know everything about everything, he seemed to know that future Kang. That's a future iteration of Kang. I mean, they're all future, but there's like something. It's so yeah. And I'm just like, great. Let's take our time. Let's spend a while with all of them. You can keep going back to the Kang well for a little bit, and I think it's an interesting point, Kate, because the performance by Jonathan Majors is fantastic, but I didn't think of it in the terms of the directing, in terms of body movement and sound design. It's all stuff that we take for granted. Because we're all fully aware of the crazy, CG rendered galaxy universe, whatever you want to call it, the realm. But in terms of, just making things sound the right way, the way his ship operates being so different than anything we've seen before, those little attentions to detail are really just make you understand what a terrifying adversary this guy is going to be. And this is him not at full power.
Because he couldn't use time.
Yeah, he's not that angry, except for in the one scene that Nate brought up where he just starts breaking stuff. He's not really that angry for most of this movie, so...
And it was nice. It was nice to see. It's like, I have all the power here. I've already done the conquering, so I don't feel like it was like. And another Star Wars thing, they love their platforms. The evil guys love the platforms.
Yeah, they do.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Kang's always been a platform guy.
Yeah.
That's coming true. Down. It was nice.
Yeah. No, I think all of that is really well done, and it's exciting. And I'm going to reiterate a point now that Kate is here. I do want to give just a shout out to the way that Peyton Reed was able to use Michelle Pfeiffer and take advantage of the fact that she is there and certainly capable of kicking ass when needs to be. I made this point a couple of times on earlier parts of the conversation, but it's so significant because in the same week that I see Ant-Man, I see the season 3 premiere of Star Trek Picard, and that starts off, minor spoiler, Gates McFadden, who played Dr. Crusher, has just got this like laser rifle, and she's just also kicking ass, and it's like,
cool.
It's nice to see, that you'd be like, well, the ladies of a certain age are not going to be able to kick anybody's ass, and it's like, well, haven't you seen, Sigourney Weaver's body of work, just in general? And I was just like, it's great to see both of those things. They started off this movie with that, and they started off Picard with that. And I think it's great to be reminded of, obviously just how wonderful she's been, but it's like, yeah, she's still great,
Yeah.
So I thought it was great the way she shined.
In Shazam, we're going to get some women of a certain age.
That's a great point.
That can still get. I don't think as anyone in the universe that would be like, yeah, Helen Mirren, nah.
Well, I interviewed David Patrick Kelly last year. He was so cool. Luther in The Warriors, and he was in Commando, and he was in 48 Hours, and he was in The Crow, right? And he talked a little bit about ageism in Hollywood and how it's still very prevalent. And it's nice to see the opposite in this with Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer having very strong roles and very commanding performances and still kicking ass after
Arguably,
decades upon decades.
They're the Ant-Man and the Wasp that make the movie go forward. It's not Hope and Lang. It's like we get the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie about the original Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Totally.
Because
right.
Michael
But they
Douglas is that
also-
hero shot when he's walking
Yeah.
in and all the
They
ants,
also-
and there are a lot of ants.
There's also
What
the
was that, Nate?
probability matrix scene, okay, and then Ant-Man fights Kang at the end. So I think it's definitely more of an ensemble film than some of
Yeah.
the previous Ant-Man films.
Mhm.
But I don't know if I can sit silently while you disparage the hard work that Scott
Well,
Lang and
I'm going to say that they
I like
don't.
Scott. I just
I'm
didn't
going to
think
say
he
they
had
don't
an
do
arc until
nearly.
the end.
They don't do nearly enough with Hope though in this movie. You know, I feel
yes,
like
Hope definitely gets
Hope and Hank are
sidelined, for
characters
sure.
that I think they could have beefed up their parts a little bit. But Hope, of course, is there at key moments, and our friend Katie in an earlier conversation made the point when she comes back to the portal, it's literally Hope coming back to his life, and Katie got very emotional when that happened. It really moved her that way. But so both Hank and Hope very important,
Yeah.
but they don't get as much screen time as Scott, of course, but also Cassie. So I think that there is a. I would love to have seen more from both of them, but I think that they're all five of the leads are very important for the storytelling, and I think that it's not always easy to balance that. You know what I mean? So
I
think
definitely
they
agree
did a
that
great
in
job.
this movie, Scott doesn't have as much of an arc. But if you look at it of the scope of all three of the Ant-Man movies,
Yeah.
Sure.
this brings it full circle around to him and Cassie. And so
Yeah.
in that scope, I think it's a great character arc for him. But I would definitely agree that watching the movie by itself, is not, he doesn't change that much.
Also,
Right.
what do you think about Nate? I had this thought. I had a late night thought last night because I knew I was going to do this, and I was like, "Oh, I should have something like smart to say." This
Clearly,
is the
you've
first...
never been on this show before. If you continue to come equipped with something smart to
I've
say,
been on
but
this show before.
I
Daniel Jewel will say hi.
appreciate you wanting to be the one that brings something smart.
I also am
I'm
very
only
excited.
talking about myself, not
Somebody's
either of
gotta
you
do it.
gentlemen.
Yeah, I was the one that was just like, remember that the five number bridge code because that's going to be important at some point.
Well, that character, by the way, who could read everyone's
Quaz.
thoughts, amazing.
Oh yeah, that and that actor, of course, who played Chidi on The Good Place. That was one of the. I had no idea he was in this movie, and I just couldn't have been happier to see him show up on the screen. We knew Bill Murray was in this movie, but to see him show up, I'm like, oh my god, Chidi, and it was the perfect part for him.
So good.
I can't imagine a scenario where we would ever see him again, but if they do bring him back, they don't need to explain. They don't need to explain why it makes sense. Just bring him back.
Secret Wars.
Secret Wars. Yes, anybody can be.
Anybody can be in Secret Wars. My question was like, I feel like this is the first time that Ant-Man hasn't been a part of a team, because like he's made choices on like the little scale, like you have to fight Darren to save your daughter, you have to do this to save your family,
right?
And like when he's been part of the big fights, he's either been on like Team Cap fighting with Captain America. He's not stupid, and even though he lost third time in prison, and then in the big fight against Thanos. But like this is the first time it occurred to me at the end watching it that he's made a huge decision on his own, and it might have been a blunder. That it's like he's now have to carry that weight of like that's what it means to be a superhero is consideration over
right. If everything goes wrong from his decision, it's not Tony's fault. It's his fault. It's Steve's fault. It's all on Scott. So we were talking about that. We were talking about that earlier. The fact that the realization and just seeing that, I think that Scott Lang, having been a former criminal essentially, is at a different level than a lot of the other superheroes. When we meet him, he's a lot less heroic. He's not Hank Pym. He's not that Ant-Man.
So for Nate's comment about the full arc, and then like he, in a way, like it's not just him saving his family. It's like he makes a really big decision, and is that what it means to be a superhero? So does by the end of the third movie, is that his superhero arc where he's finally a superhero? He's finally an Avenger in a way.
Yeah, I think that, especially with the existentialism scene at the end, and again, like we've talked a lot about Jonathan Majors' performance, but also what that makes this specific characterization of Kang really cool is he has that Doctor Doom thing of like I'm doing what I'm doing because it's for the good of everyone, and you don't understand because I'm smarter and better than you, so you just have to trust me. And it creates this dilemma of like, well, we want to stop you because obviously you're bad and people are going to get hurt, but in the end, is what he wanted to do actually going to cause less damage than what is going to happen?
Right.
And so, yeah, that dilemma
Yeah.
and him. I didn't really think about it that way, but now that you pointed out, like, yeah, he's definitely not been in the stick and control of making these decisions, and now for him to have been the one that like led this, that now whatever the repercussions that happen, he has to deal with, like, well, maybe I shouldn't have, maybe I could have done this different or whatever, and that's a very large burden to wear.
Right. And even I'm going to go steal this for Kang so that he doesn't kill my daughter. You know what I mean? Like you go that far back in the film, he's like, I have to make this decision. And, you know, even when Hope and Janet are trying to say like, you can't give it to him, he's like, well, I have to, you know, it's like, I understand that there are consequences. We can try and solve that problem, but I don't want him to kill my daughter, you know? So I think that, there's a surprising amount of weight on Ant-Man's shoulders. And, you know, I think getting to really get to know Kang, I think your best villains that we tend to get, and it's not MCU proper, all of them, I always point out that you feel like you can buy into what they're saying up until a point. Thanos makes sense. He makes sense. And whoa, he went crazy. Killmonger. Oh my gosh, what you're saying makes sense. Like, okay, that's too far. Magneto. My gosh, Magneto makes a lot of sense right up until he's like, well, yeah. And then, you know, then we're going to kill all the non-powered people. It's like, no, you lived through the Holocaust. You're missing the point, buddy. But, you know, it's, and so I think Kang is another one of those. He's trying to do some bad to stop the really bad from happening,
Right.
which I think watching that unfold will be fun, and then at times probably heartbreaking and tragic and all everything in between. As we start to wind down the conversation here, Zach, I want to start with you. Just sort of where you think things might go, what you hope we get next, whether it's about these characters, the MCU in general, just your thoughts after the movie was over, and you know what you're thinking might be next and what you hope might be next.
Well, I appreciate that this film did not end on an obvious cliffhanger in the sense of like Scott being stuck in the quantum realm, which I felt like, you know, Kate, you were saying maybe a scene was missing or something that felt tagged on at the end where Scott was rescued suddenly by Hope. Like,
yeah, let me just interject
Cassie.
because in an earlier conversation, I came from a place where I started and I felt like it was a missed opportunity. I thought that they should have done it. And then I talked myself out of it because the second movie ends with him getting trapped in the quantum realm. So then that would have been 2 movies in a row
where he
that's
gets
what
stuck in the quantum realm.
And I think the idea that he and Hope could have spent some time there together and not instantly been rescued, I think that there was some storytelling there, but also they're not in the business of, you know, making a bunch of Ant-Man movies. So
also, they already figured out how to get there,
right.
and like they just needed a map, and they just spent a whole movie there. So she got a map. So like, if they had left them there, people would have been like, well, actually, in the movie, they already figured out a way to save Hank. So why couldn't they bring them both back?
Is Nate? Is that the voice you use in your head when you read basically everyone on Twitter?
Yes, yeah, that's the default Twitter voice.
If you could just get Twitter to talk to text or text to talk, that's what
kind of how they all sounded at when they were at the congressional hearing of Twitter.
They kind of did actually. Yeah.
Zach, I want to let you finish your point though, so that we didn't get that moment.
No, we didn't, but I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
It made it tricky with my son just recently got into D&D, and his dungeon master likes to kind of, you know, drag on a storyline.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, that's going to make it awkward now because they just wrap this up really nice and neat. But, you know, he's like, well, I got to still defeat the White Witch. Anyways, what I like about this, I like that ending though, because it's like, no, I kind of miss having an ending that's just like, no, it's done for now. Right. Yeah. Versus, oh, what's going to happen next? Like the Doctor Who episode that, you know, and then they recap the first 10 minutes and the first 20 minutes of the next episode. I'm going old school Doctor Who, not like new Doctor Who.
I picked up what you were putting down.
You know what you feel me.
I went to Gallifrey one. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's up. So, and by the way, there was some shades of like old school Doctor Who in this too, where
Totally.
moments where I'm like, oh man, that feels like a character on the Doctor, like all of the companions saving the Doctor this time. But I love where this is going. I if this is the end of the Ant-Man franchise for now, I'm okay with that. I think
agree.
these 3 films are just so nice, repeated viewing movies. Not every Marvel franchise is a repeat. Iron Man, for example, certain parts of it. This one, I feel like I can watch these over and over and over again. I'm totally fine with that. I love having a Welcome Back Kotter reference in this and talking to my son about that being one of my favorite sitcoms.
2 references.
Right? Yeah. And like, bring on more Welcome Back Kotter. But I love
Daddy, what's a horse shack?
Mr. Kotter, I got a note. It was really a fun ride. If, like Kate said, if this is a nice way to kick off the 5th phase, and I'm on board. I'm back on board. Like Nate, you were saying, feeling a little burnt out. This charged me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think, being able to kind of not so much reset the franchise, but it's like, okay, this is where we're steering into, the next era. When you think about it, when a new creative team comes on comic books in the last 20 years, they usually start with a new volume. So now we're in like volume 5 of the MCU, and it's like, yeah, you liked a lot of the other stuff. This is a little different. We'll refer back to that stuff, but this is something different. Nate, I want to ask you the same question. What you think about what's next, and even if it's what you hope is next, that might not actually happen.
I think a lot of people's issues with Marvel movies is the comedy fatigue, and that especially ever since Guardians, even the movies that aren't necessarily comedy movies are just packed with jokes and light moments. And with this movie, it's fine because Ant-Man has always been like a comedy. That's why it worked. It made more sense here. I'm hoping that with this, we can kind of like, whatever the next movie stuff is, that they can let those movies be whatever they need to be.
Yeah, like put that
without without injecting all right, well, these are the 4 things it needs to be to be an MCU movie. Like, just let it be Marvel characters and let it be a comic book movie. Because comic books are a very wide genre, but so far of the movies that we've got, it's been very narrow. This movie felt like the most comic book movie we've gotten probably since like Endgame Infinity War, just in terms of like going to a different space and all these new characters, and then the fight scenes and the probability matrix and all that stuff. I really love the concept of Kang, so I don't know. I'm excited. I'm feeling charged up also about what's coming. The payoff from that last season of Loki ending coming now, like, was worth the wait. I will say. My question is though, is this Kang a Nathaniel Richards, a Reed Richards descendant? And if so, does that mean that our Fantastic Four is going to be black, and we're going to get a black Reed Richards?
I hope so.
I mean, they went 1/4 of that direction with the really bad one by putting Michael B. Jordan. I mean,
it's okay. They fixed it. It's fine. He was Killmonger. It's fine.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting that and Chris Evans gets to do a do-over after being Johnny Storm as well. So
I don't remember any of these things that you're talking about
because they didn't happen. Yeah,
they didn't happen.
And Fantastic didn't happen.
Nate has a very specific one of those. A very specific one of those Men in Black.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
But it's only set to movies about the Fantastic Four, and I contend that the Roger Corman Fantastic Four is still the best Fantastic Four that we've gotten. And boy, there are problems with it, but it's all on budget and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I agree with a lot of, what you're saying, Nate. And I think we're in a good place going forward. And we do have to remember that not everything needs to be for everybody. Comic book movies not that long ago weren't for everybody. So it's okay if people don't like it. And it's you don't have to go and see it if you think you're not going to like it.
Right.
I think
but also the flip side of that coin is they have to make movies for specific people and stop trying to make every movie for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
What makes
Yeah.
comics great is that you can get your, you know, your crime noir fix over here, and then get your fantasy fix over here, and then get your space adventures over here, and then get your lighthearted family comedy over here, and then get your really
Right.
dark, gritty magic thing over here. Like, and it all can exist within the comic space, but it's allowed to be its own thing, and that's what the movies need. And I think Doctor Strange, that last one, was a step in the right direction. I do still think there was some Marvelisms injected into that movie that didn't need to be there.
Sure.
But the overall vibe of it being like embracing this dark, mystical story, like that's the direction we need to go in.
Right.
And so I'm more hopeful now than I was after watching Wakanda Forever. That's for sure.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
And Kate, same question for you. In terms of where you think we're going, hope we're going, and you know, your thoughts about what's next, as they say.
So this was a movie, and I was talking to people about it. Kevin Feige, in the beginning of this, the kicking off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, was very clear and very open to, you don't have to watch all of the movies to watch one movie. And it's kind of gotten to that point in phase 4 where it's like, ah, crap, I didn't see that one movie. And am I going to understand what the heck's going on? And it felt like this was the first time in a while where it's like, it's straight like phase 4 and the end of phase 3, because you're hitting the end of the Thanos arc, was straying away from all of that, where you kind of had to know who everybody was in order to enjoy the ending. And then it still felt like in phase 4 that everything was so fragmented. It's like, wait a minute, but how does this relate to the big picture? And this was the first movie in a while for Marvel where I felt comfortable saying to my roommate who doesn't watch Marvel, you can go and see this movie and have fun.
Yeah.
And you don't have to know the big picture. It is a standalone. If you watch the other Ant-Man movies, if you know who Ant-Man was in the Thanos arc in the Infinity Saga, like, you'll enjoy it. And you're going to get another, this is a kickoff to something in the future.
Mhm.
But this felt like an Iron Man movie. Like, this felt like I can enjoy this movie and have a good bite out of it and walk out and be like, oh, was that a little Star Wars? Or, oh, I really like that adventure I just went on. And it was character driven. It was funny. It had drama. It had a lot of great characters in it. And I hope that Marvel is listening to people who are enjoying this as a movie that they can just enjoy and not really have to explain. Because we understood pieces of the multiverse, because Scott Lang is such an everyman character that was a really great way to introduce multiversal probability matrix. And but don't worry about it.
Right.
Like, those are just all of the choices you could have made, but don't worry about it. Just keep going.
Look, I think that the important thing is you can set up stuff to come, but not at the expense of the story you're telling.
Yeah.
I often refer to the example of, I am in a very small minority, and I liked the Amazing Spider-Man 2, the second Andrew Garfield movie. But my biggest knock on that is that they're setting up like 4 movies that, by the way, they never made.
Nope.
They set up Sinister Six. They're setting up some Green Goblin stuff. They're setting up the Black Cat. And it's like, in there is this great story about Peter and Gwen, which is why those 2 movies, I think, work on any level, is because of the 2 of them. And it's like, you really hit it in all this other stuff. Like, make a Sinister Six movie, but, you don't need to start setting it up right away. I mean, the BJ Novak's character is Alistair Smythe, who creates the Spider Slayers. It's like, everybody doesn't have to be somebody who could get their own movie.
Right.
And I'm still thinking about that 8 years later. But,
the big thing I think we're going to get is the end. The thing that got me at the end of the movie was, after that really great Loki season 2, yum, nom nom nom, I'll eat this sandwich.
Yeah.
Please give it to me.
Wow.
Was the I always look forward to the last 3 words of every Marvel movie, which is blank will return.
Yeah.
And it's Kang will return. And I wouldn't be surprised that every movie that Kang shows up in, it's not going to be the hero. It's going to be Kang will return. And it's every single time Kang enters the universe, he's going to come back. He's going to come back.
Yeah.
There's going to be another one. He's going to come back, because it's all going to lead to Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. So I wouldn't be surprised if they flipped their own kind of on their own little bit that they started to do, for lack of a better word, because I can't think of it right now, on its head. And it's like, now that we've entered a multiversal time traveling wizard, basically, that all of those movies are going to end with Kang will return.
Well, we can't be sure if or when we will see Scott Lang on the big screen again, but don't worry, because he will be in bookstores September 5th. That's right. You will be able to pre-order. Look out for the little guy. And
That's amazing.
That's
I've
incredible.
said multiple times, it's a huge missed opportunity if Paul Rudd is not out there doing in stores and book signings and
Wow.
Or the audiobook.
Well, he should definitely do the audiobook. I mean, we heard him reading the audiobook in this, so
Sure,
I
they
feel
did
like
an
we should
audio
get it.
book.
Amazing.
And then
Yeah.
quick thing, has anyone on any of these three, or even this one, talk about the Easter egg that they dropped with the gate code, the bridge code?
No, I have not. I wanted to ask you what your Easter egg was, and I
sounded
don't
like
know
a
the
date.
bridge code. Yeah, what is the bridge
Yeah.
code?
So the bridge code that Quaz grabs from the guy,
Yeah.
like, I will die first, is at 18147. And that's when I was just like, 18147, don't forget that. And I'm like, it sounds like either
Sounds
a
like
date,
it means something. Yeah.
or it sounds like something like two things that are put together, like two issues. And it is 2 issues from Marvel. So what do my notes say? It is Avengers 181 was Scott Lang's first ever appearance in the Marvel
Nice.
universe from 1979. And then a month later, in Marvel Premiere 47, is when he first becomes Ant-Man.
Boom.
So for
Jeez.
Nate's
Jeez.
arc of, like, he becomes Ant-Man in this movie, kind of, in a way. Like, he is Ant-Man, but, like, in terms of him, like, actively making a choice that could affect a wider universe, like, it makes a
Wow.
lot of sense of, like, those
I
two.
do like when a script just calls for some numbers. There's somebody's like, whoa, hold on, give
can
me a
actually
second.
do that.
I've got numbers for you. Well,
What
thank
kind of
you.
numbers do you want? Well, I got
Thank you
your
for
numbers.
giving us that, Kate. And Kate, let people know where they can keep in touch with you, and please tell them about your film and where they can find it.
You can keep in touch with me on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I hated Twitter, so I stopped. But you can keep in touch with me on Instagram at Cornellable, Cornellable. Or you can follow me at Uncanny Film, which is in the little doobie-doo down below. That is the X-Men fan film that I made about Rogue and Gambit. It's just a continuation of Rogue 1995.
Cool.
And Nate, it's on the screen, but there's also audio audience. How can people find you and keep in touch with you and see if you will read their tweets in the voice you did earlier?
Yes, you can find me everywhere at Dog Like Nate. That's dog with 2 G's. And if you tweet at me, I will read the tweet in that voice to myself.
Well, I'm going to start tweeting you every day just so that you can read it in that
God.
voice. And Zach Shaffer, please let everybody know where they can find you.
I mean, the website is $2latefee.com, TWO. All the links are there. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. We're everywhere, always. 80s, 90s movie podcast. Check us out. We got great interviews. Next month, Martial Art Madness. We're going to have phenomenal interviews with some really talented people in the martial art community. So stay tuned.
Have you done an episode on the 1990 Captain America with Matt Salinger in the title role?
We have not. That is on our slate, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did reach out to Reb Brown to do an interview. Who knows if that'll come down the pipe? It's interesting booking guests, as I'm sure you guys can all relate to that.
Sure.
I'll leave it at that. No controversial, but we're due for a comic book type movie to cover on the show, and that'll come down the pipe, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, Zach, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about it. Even if you hadn't liked the movie, you would have been more than welcome.
Oh, thanks. And I mean, I'm not as knowledgeable as Nate and Kate, but Kate
Nate
dropping
and
it.
Yeah.
Plus 8.
That's the podcast that you guys can spin off, is the Nate and Kate show.
Absolutely.
We'll just read tweets.
And you both have to do that voice the whole time.
In that voice.
But
See?
but I think that what Zach was
Zach knows
saying
what
is
I'm talking
that
about.
he clearly knows that he knows more than I do. That's what the takeaway was there, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You can find me Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. Please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST, and you will get our show Marvel Movie Talk, which will mostly be back Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. There's just not as much Marvel content coming in 2023 as we would have expected, but there's still plenty to talk about, including the 1990 Captain America, including Elektra, including the Ang Lee Hulk. There's still episodes that we've promised that we've never actually done. So subscribe, stay tuned, and we will see you next time here on the Blackcast Network. And as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!